Norfolk Advisory Committee to order for the April 3rd meeting. We have a couple of different departments we're going to hear from tonight. The planning board is before us with a few articles, and then we're going to hear some follow-up on some of the Community Preservation Committee articles that we talked about. We had Cindy with us 3 meetings ago, two or 3 meetings ago, I can't remember which, and we'll hear some follow-up on that, and the ones that she was not able to get to or we weren't able to hear because one of our expert witnesses was not available. So the first thing on the agenda is the 3 planning board articles, and Rich, is Chad coming, or is he online?
He is coming.
Okay. Is he coming in person, or?
He is coming in person.
Okay, maybe we'll start with this. Do you want me to wait?
Yes.
Okay, all right. I don't have to wait, by the way. I want you to know that. I don't have to wait. We're doing we're doing Chad a favor. I'm kidding. But so the CPC articles that we had some, Caitlin wasn't able to join us last time, and is that why you're here? I'm sorry, I should have checked. You are here on?
Yes, that there were some questions from the board for me in regards to that article.
Yep, the Mirror Lake sediment issue. Okay. Would you like to join us? I will do a roll call. Thank you, Jonathan. That's why you are the excellent vice chairman. I'll do a roll call. Melissa Sear.
Here.
Brian Beachkowski.
Here.
Mike G.
Here.
Joyce Terrio.
Here.
Jonathan Hurwitz.
Here.
Rob Garrity.
Here.
Ken Fitzgerald.
Here.
Jason Craig.
Here.
David Lutz here. We are all present and accounted for. So at the meeting we had a couple weeks ago, there were some questions about the round 2 or phase, whatever, I should say round 2 of the phase 2 article that we talked to you about last fall. And I guess the first question is where is the Conservation Commission, and where are you at in terms of going forward with this?
I'm pretty much have come to the same conclusion.
As last fall, or?
As last fall. We weren't involved with the phase 1.
Okay.
And we haven't been involved with any of the planning that's gone behind putting together this phase 2 scope, which is, fairly vague considering, the dollar amount that's being requested. And so I honestly don't even know enough about the project to even be able to make a professional opinion on it.
Would they have to come before the Conservation Commission for any permits?
They would need a notice of intent.
Okay.
And so as the property owner of a portion of the lake, the town would actually have to sign that notice of intent. Presumably the town would need to hire someone to review it. And then the Conservation Commission would also look to hire someone to review the application once it's submitted. And both of those costs may fall, well, at least one of them will fall back on the town to pay for. And I'm not sure if that's included in the scope. It doesn't appear to be.
So it's been represented to us that phase 2 is sort of simply a more in-depth analysis of the sediment, and that with the intention that if they discover something that's problematic, that changes the nature of the project or perhaps kills it. But if they don't, they would go forward. Is that something that makes you interested? Have you heard that stated about the project, or?
I did meet with a representative from TRC, as well as Friends of Mirror Lake, in early January. And it was discussed that some of the first activities would be a T-clip, I believe it's called, which would determine what type of chromium it is that was found. And then there was some additional analysis that needed to take place. However, the summary provided for the Phase 2 scope of work, it states, if dredging is a believed to be a viable long-term restoration option, the next steps would be, and then it lists the scope of work with the dollar amount of $220,000. So I'm a little confused by that. It seems that dredging has already been determined to be a viable long-term restoration option. And again, the town was not a part of that decision, which I believe, they should be considering the proximity to the Spruce Street wells. Regardless of, if dredging does take place, regardless of what method is used, there will be a non-zero amount of fines that enter the water, which will, flow into Stop River and, may have impacts to those wells.
All right, and has the Conservation Commission taken a formal position on this? Or?
So their position is that, obviously, the long-term health of Mirror Lake is a worthy goal. But as far as whether or not, they haven't made a determination on this specific scope of work.
Okay.
Just that they support the overall goal.
Which includes potentially dredging.
Correct.
So.
Whether or not, it's something that needs to take place now, or if it's better for the town, for the lake, for it to happen, 10, 20 years down the line. None of that has been discussed.
Okay.
So.
All right. Mike?
Can I just a clarifying question? So this is the exact same thing that was on the warrant in the fall, right?
Yep.
And in the fall, we said there wasn't enough information. And it sounds like there's not any more information yet, right? Or there is, I can't quite tell. Do we have more information now than we had in the fall, or is it basically the same situation?
There was no additional written information. There was just the meeting that took place in early January where some of the analysis that would take place was explained in more detail.
Okay.
And Blair Crane was actually also in attendance, and some issues related to access and the dam, those were clarified and determined to be a non-issue. But as far as, some of the other points that I brought up in my October 11th memo are still open.
All right, thanks.
Joyce?
Thank you. So if Concom still basically has the same determination, understanding, feeling, may I ask a question of Cindy to find out what CPC, if they've taken a vote or it's their money? They're looking to.
Our money. We have to authorize it. The town meeting has to authorize it.
But they're supporting the warrant article.
I understand.
So excuse me
Go
if
ahead.
I didn't articulate it correctly. Cindy, did you
I'm
guys
here.
take a vote?
Hello,
She just asked
I'm
you.
here.
Go ahead. Go again.
Hi, Cindy. Did you guys take a vote on this, the Mirror Lake money? I mean, you guys are
did
supporting
indeed.
this, you're bringing the article forward.
Yes, we did, and we supported it. Unfortunately, we did ask for information from the Conservation Commission with regard to any ongoing concerns that they had. We were aware of the January meeting. However, we received no information from the Conservation Commission detailing any continuing concerns that they had. So without that information, we voted to move forward with a positive recommendation and a warrant article for the town meeting. And I will note, and I might be a little confused as to what Caitlin was saying, that the total cost for this phase 2 testing is the $220,000. And phase 3 would be potentially dredging or some other type of remediation for Mirror Lake, and that is not something that is under consideration in this current warrant article. This is simply the phase 2 sediment testing. So we also realized that Rentham is the bigger part of this. We do not know if they are moving forward with a warrant article in any of their town meetings for this. So that said, we've discussed it, and CPC as a whole, and I think unanimously, voted to move forward with it again.
Okay, thank you.
Does anyone else have any questions? Yeah. All right. We may have some follow-up on this, but thank you for that, and thank you, Cindy. You're all set if you want to. One.
Thank you.
And while I've got Cindy, why don't we have Sue Jacobson come up and discuss the affordable housing article that she was on vacation when this came up, so.
My flight was delayed, I apologize, so I
Don't worry
was
about
not
it.
able to get on Zoom to get on the meeting. I was on the plane.
Don't worry about that, please. So this is Article, sorry. This is Article 18, which the CPC voted on. The Housing Trust asked them to support this.
Yes, so
If you could
we,
explain it.
as everyone here knows, I believe, CPC is required to put their money in different pots, and one of the pots is affordable housing. Not every year, but probably every third or fourth year, I go to CPC and ask for additional funding so that we can create or preserve affordable housing. I went to their meeting and said that this money would help us potentially. It can only be used to create or preserve, but potentially our hope is that with this additional funding, we would be able to add another home to our subsidized housing inventory. It allows us to kind of go outside of our normal formula and maybe pay a little bit more for a property than we could do otherwise. And CPC very generously voted favorably for that article. As they have done in the past. We have had a great partnership, and we've been very fortunate to receive their support.
I have a technical question about this, which I guess I didn't pick up on. It's asking for 139 from the Community Housing Reserve and 111 from the Community Preservation Trust undesignated reserve. What's the difference?
So the difference is that 10%, that pot that I talked about.
That's the name of it? Okay,
Right.
I didn't realize it had.
And then the
name.
others comes from their
So
undesignated
there's a
funds.
conservation reserve and a
Correct.
historic reserve. Okay, thank you.
Sure.
Does anyone else have any questions? Go ahead, John.
Thank you.
Sure.
The fact that you're looking for additional money or a higher amount than the formula would typically allow for, I guess my question is, and forgive me, I'm not familiar with what that formula is, whether it's a dollar amount or what, is it still viable, just with increase in property
So it is-
prices? Because $250,000 doesn't strike me as excessive for a home price even on the lower end. So this is more of a, less to do perhaps with what we have in front of us right now, but perhaps more going forward is, what the basis of the formula, and is it indexed against inflation or housing pricing, or do we need to take a different look at it in town so we don't have to necessarily go through the ask for additional funds above and beyond the formula if the formula is no longer viable for you to get new inventory?
So it's a combination of funds right now that we would be taking the money that we're getting from CPC, if it's approved at town meeting. The Affordable Housing Trust has a balance, but we have, if you will, a formula where if we purchase a home, the loss to the community, because it's a loss when we buy a home, cannot be more than $175,000. So we used to be able to do that quite easily. Can't do that anymore. But we recently were donated a property, and the net results, we sold that parcel of land. It's much easier for us to buy an existing home than it is to build, because we have to pay prevailing wage. So between what we recouped from the sale of that property and this amount that we would be getting from CPC would allow us to take some funds from the Affordable Housing Trust and purchase a home, and we can be outside of that formula because the fundings come from other sources.
Okay. Do you have a sort of a inventory or a paper inventory of what might be available, or?
No, we get it just like everybody else does when it goes on the market.
Well, yeah, I just wonder if you had got your eye out of the corner.
Well, we do post on the website that we're actively
Right.
looking for homes in certain price ranges, but, in those price ranges, the work that's required
Sure.
is significant. And again, with having to pay prevailing wage, unless we can find a contractor that's just himself, his own business, it just puts us outside of being able to do that.
Rob?
Susan, thanks for coming. What's the inventory right now? How many units do we have in town? Do you know?
So our housing production, our subsidized housing inventory number is always fluid.
Yeah.
And here's why. The 40B projects that we have in town, when those are permitted by the town clerk, when the town clerk stamps the permit, those units, if there's 10 affordable units in that development, they automatically go onto our subsidized housing inventory. But after 1 year, they fall off. And it takes more time than a year for a development to complete. So once a year, HLC, formerly known as DHCD, sends out a request, an inventory form request, and we provide them with an update that tells them what units have been sold and what units haven't been sold. So for example, the Village has 8 affordable units in it. They fell off. This June, all 8 will go back on because I'll provide the certificate of occupancy. That's the proof that you need to provide. So it's a very fluid number. It just like our percentage. If you go online and look at our percentage, I believe it's Peter might know it.
4.21.
4.21, but it's really not much higher. In my world, it's much higher. It's probably closer to 5 when you add in the developments that we have in the pipeline and the units that have sold. So our number is somewhere around 189 to 200. It's just a very fluid number, so I hate to give an exact number.
No, that was great. Thanks.
Does anyone else have any questions? Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
We'll now turn to the planning board articles. You gentlemen want to join us? Why don't we, Article 25 is the amendment to the inclusionary bylaw. Why don't we start with that one?
Yes, so the inclusionary bylaw there's 2 reasons why we're bringing this article to town meeting. One is it's not in alignment with the new MBTA guidelines, and 2 is it's not in alignment with our housing production plan. So this bylaw was changed back in 2021, and it became much more, I guess, restrictive for developers to,
Much more inclusionary.
there you go, much more inclusionary, and so we looked at this, because it's not in alignment with these two things, we looked at what are we gonna do? How do we get this back in alignment? So we went back and looked at the old bylaw, and we're bringing it to the table now. So I'm gonna let Rich kind of talk about the MBTA portion of it, why it's not in alignment with the MBTA portion of it.
Go ahead, Rich.
So in terms of the MBTA guidelines that HLC, DHC formerly put together, if you have an inclusionary bylaw, it needs to start at 10 dwelling units or more and go from there. The percentage needs to stay consistent at a number of 10%. You can't round up, you actually round down, and 10%, straight 10. Now, there is a provision whereby a town can demonstrate from a third party through an economic feasibility analysis that if you have an inclusionary bylaw, existing one, or you're thinking about doing something differently, if you could demonstrate through economics that bylaw, if it escalates up, similar to where we're at right now with the present bylaw, and goes below 10%, or excuse me, below 10 units, could be approved, but you have to demonstrate that you're not going to unduly restrict housing production. Because the basis of the MBTA community zoning, it's a housing production bylaw or a zoning article. It's not a affordable housing bylaw. So while many towns have inclusionary bylaws like ours, the purpose of the MBTA zoning is to allow for high-density multifamily zoning in the MBTA communities. I mean, that's the function of it. So, and because of the guidelines that put out, those are the requirements. There's one other provision that needs to be adjusted in terms of the MBTA compliance, is that our present bylaw requires a special permit. You can have a permit in terms of the inclusionary bylaw, but it can't be a special permit because that's a discretionary permit. So you can require that amount, but you can't have a discretionary permit tied to it.
What?
So
How is it a permit if it's not a discretionary decision on the part of the permitting board?
So it's a permit the board would issue. I would say it's analogous to by right. So if something's by right, you approve it with conditions similarly, but you can't deny it. So you don't have the discretion to deny something.
Okay. All right. Thank you for,
Yep,
should have
clarifying.
said by right.
Yep.
So it ends up more like being a site plan approval, in a certain
Yes.
sense.
Yes. Yep.
Yeah. So I guess the question I have, and Chet, I appreciate the impact on the MBTA stuff, and perhaps we should have taken this in a different order, but why are we getting rid of it for the rest of the town? I don't understand that. We just did this 3 years ago. I mean,
So we looked at that, and what we found was we've had no developments in this town in many years. And since we've had no planned neighborhood developments since this bylaw has gone into effect. So we started asking questions why. Now, we've had 40Bs,
right?
so we started asking why. And so what we found out was, well, with the economics don't work with what we have. So we found out that the economics don't work, and so they're just going the 40B route. They're like, I'll just go the 40B route. For me, the economics work better.
Okay.
And so we said, well, let's take a step back, because what we had was working.
Was it?
We're getting developments. We weren't getting forced into the 40Bs. So we said, let's take a step back and let's go back to now it's not the exact original because we have all the MBTA stuff
Right.
in there, but yeah.
So I guess I'm I'm sorry to monopolize this discussion. Sort of one more question is, the economics of 2021 and 2024 are a lot different than they were in 2018 and 2019. Interest rates are 3 times higher than they were at that point. Costs, inflationary costs, all those kinds of things. Economics, yeah. And if the inclusionary zoning is part of that, that's an issue. But how many of the 40Bs that are getting built now or under permit were under process before 2021? All of them.
They were approved before 2021?
In process.
Yeah, in process, they were approved. They were all approved. So
we haven't had any 40Bs since 2021 either then.
So,
Yeah, they're coming.
well,
That's a,
well,
hold
actually,
on. Okay, go ahead. No.
to just to echo that point in terms of coming, and this is part of the economics, in terms of the effect, what we're seeing in terms of our present bylaw. Cranberry Heights was a open space subdivision that was before the planning board in 2018. And it's off of Lawrence Street, just for context where it's located. And at the time, there is no municipal, there is water in Lawrence Street now, but back in that time, there wasn't water that was available. There was going to be extensions of water to the area, and water was going to be brought to this Cranberry Heights subdivision, which is in between Cranberry Meadow Road and Eagle Drive, just for in terms of context where it's located. And the concern was the contamination that's at the Buckley Man site, that if they had to blast and bring the water line up to this new development, the people who are on wells that are in that area, perhaps they could get contamination if there's impact to, subsurface water flow. So at the time, the planning board wanted to have essentially guaranteed to those residents, if something were to happen, the developer would correct the issue in terms of if that were the case. So they withdrew the request in terms of they actually sought a withdrawal with prejudice. That same developer has a new partner, and he came forward and he has submitted a project eligibility letter to Mass Housing, and now got approval March 18th for a 51-unit subdivision development, single-family homes on the same property.
How many units were in the?
21. At the time, the inclusionary bylaw would have required 2 units, either payment in lieu or off-site, some combination thereof. With the 20% provision, it ramped up to 4. So the developer essentially said this, look, if you're going to make me do 20 under your conventional zoning, I'll add 5 more percent through 40B, and I can then disregard your zoning bylaws and seek waivers to do that from a development standpoint and other local bylaws. So we will see that development, and probably in May sometime, because they did get their eligibility letter. So that kind of started the thinking process that while we do want to increase the amount of affordable housing in town, I don't think the intent was to take development, whether it's multifamily or single family, and ramp up the density much larger than we originally intended. It was to make progress, but with a ownership project, only 25% is affordable. The other 70% is market rate. So now you're adding more single-family homes to your inventory. So you're not really catching, you're actually getting further away. So the thought was that we should go back to where it was. And quite in fact, we're still in discussions that maybe that development, if this bylaw passed, we could bring them back in, so to speak, as an open space subdivision and not have it go 40B, because frankly, the plan is going to be a disaster for that neighborhood in terms of the land plan that's there. And the other previous plan was in terms of impact at open space and so forth. So, but that's one example. There are other ones that are potentially considering 40B because of this escalating provision. So it's it's trying to create a balance, and what Chad was saying earlier is the housing production plan recommended looking at our bylaw, but creative incentive-based bylaw framework to create additional affordable housing, not create a bylaw that's going to force the economics where somebody's eating away market rates. So we're actually exacerbating in terms of our overall housing unit production in the town. And so that was in part why the trust as well wanted to go back to this. And in fact, one further point, when this came forward in terms of back in 2021, we had hoped that we could have done that housing production plan at the time to look at this issue and not bring it forward at that May 21. Because, yeah, nothing's happened since 21. What has happened since 21 is we now have a potential 40B development. The last subdivision that was approved in town was 2018, which was Norway Farms off of Medway Street. A multifamily project that was approved was 7 Hill Street, and that was also in 2018. So in terms of development that's under the town bylaw rules and regulations, we're not seeing it. So that was the basis for this consideration.
Rob? Sue, did you have anything to add to that? I'm sorry.
No, just that we have been, that the trust met about this and voted to return it to the 10%. To go along with our housing production plan, but obviously it's very important to the Affordable Housing Trust that we build affordable housing in town, but that the projects that are being brought forward are projects that work for the town, and that we're not having projects come in because they're so close to having to provide 25%. At 20%, they're saying, well, we'll just go for all of it. And we have met with a couple of other developers that, have indicated that if our bylaw, since we've had discussion, if our bylaw stays tiered, then they will bring these projects back differently. They will bring them back as 40B projects, which, provides certainly additional affordable housing, but it's also, as Rich said, it's adding significantly to our housing stock. And they're not going to be 1 and 2 bedroom homes. The majority of these, all of the homes in this 51 unit subdivision are 3 and 4 bedroom homes. And just as a side piece, Peter Diamond brought the petition forward. We've agreed to disagree on this matter, but last week Rich, Peter, and I all attended the Medfield Select Board. It was a joint, initially, meeting with the Select Board and the Planning Board, and it was a public forum for folks to ask questions. And we currently have Medfield's tiered system. Medfield's somewhere in the 9% range. So I think when you get up into that range, it's certainly easier to be more selective about what comes to town because you're so much closer to 10%. But somebody, it may have even been you, Peter, did you ask why or was it someone else, asked why they were going to have a 10% affordable housing in the MBTA communities area, but the rest of town was tiered, so similar to what we would have. And somebody from one of their boards responded that they may have been overzealous in implementing that plan because they too have not seen any traditional subdivisions. And not that they were going to get rid of it, I don't want to imply that, but that they were certainly going to do some additional research and start to look to this zoning bylaw. I think bylaws get implemented and we think they're forever, and things are forever changing. So that's my...
You have a question, Ron?
Yeah. So that thing off Seekonk Street, the development off Seekonk Street, that's a 40B?
Yes. Lakeland Hills, yes.
So here's a problem, right? You can sell 80% or 75%. What's the 75% of your houses for $1 million, and 25% of the people win the lottery and get a similar looking house for under market, where you should be building just a bunch of houses that are 550 or 750, and that would actually be an affordability win. I mean, none of this makes any sense at all. I mean, given the incentive structure, this makes sense. I mean, I hate to do it, but I think this makes sense.
Anyone else have any questions? Brian?
Yeah, one of the considerations in 2021 was if it stays at 10%, we can never catch up to 10% because it will be at 10%. New builds will be at 10%, and if we're below, it will take an infinite amount of growth to approach 10%, but we still wouldn't hit it. So that we would continuously be underneath the threshold for 40B optionality. So this would go back to that process. Then what would our plan be to actually get above the 10% affordable housing stock in the town if we take this away?
I would say, you know, we have an active housing production plan. We have a very active trust. Well, we would all like to get to 10% so that we're not forced with 40B development. I would say that we should all be extremely considerate and not race to get to 10%. Because if you want your town to provide affordable housing and to meet that threshold, but you don't want to do it with projects that necessarily may not be in the best interest of the town. And quite frankly, the only way that towns like Norfolk and communities similar to Norfolk that don't have sewer are able to reach that 10% number is it's not going to happen without some type of a multiple building development. If the expectation is that the town can do it with single family homes or with 40B developments, that's not going to happen. But the town is also not being penalized in any way, shape, or form because the state sees the town of Norfolk as an extremely active town with an active trust and an affordable unit. We have a local initiative program in town where we've bought 19 single families. We have other communities reaching out to us. How did we do that? How did we accomplish that? We're now more than ever meeting and talking about strategies and ways that maybe we can work with somebody to get a project with shovels in the ground, where maybe we start on a small scale, where we have a piece of property and we're able to put, say, 10 or 15 apartments in that location and 25% of them affordable. So I think, it's important, and we need to be mindful of the fact that we're continuously working towards that goal, but we can't race towards that goal. And we need to really pay attention to the projects that work for the town of Norfolk.
Anyone else? I have a question that is maybe unanswerable, but my understanding is we're wrapping up a master planning process. You talk about your housing planning process, but how does this, housing is part of that plan, our plan, the big plan. What's the friction there, I guess? Was this part of that overall consideration? Was affordable housing part of that overall consideration for the master plan? I think it probably was, but.
Yeah, it is. There's in terms of, because a lot of the housing that was in the 23 housing production plan, because it's very current,
Yep.
is being really rolled into the master plan, so it's touching on the same topics. Some of the bigger goal elements of that plan is to look at a variety of housing types as well, and so that's where I think the concept is we look at some bonus provisions to try to encourage the housing types that we're missing, that we need to create them going forward, to incentivize that.
Is that like an open space bonus thing, like what you get?
Similar to the open
so you
space
can
bonus, yeah.
Change your minimum lot size and
Exactly.
hoo-ha, stuff
Yep,
like that?
it would be on the same premise as that.
Sorry.
No, yeah, it's the same. It is.
I live next to the first one we did, and it's kind of a running joke in the neighborhood, so. Hoo-ha is not a technical term, by the way. so.
No. But it is, but a lot of the recommendations you'll see in the master plan are coming right from and the same community feedback through the housing production plan, even the master plan is same on point that, there aren't, it's, what do we have, 95% single-family homes in town?
Yeah.
And there's not an option for people who may want to age in place in terms of Norfolk, but not necessarily age in place in their home. So that's the kind of thing we need to try to see if we can help.
We need a lot more ranches, so I don't have to do stairs in 15 years, but anyways.
No, point taken.
Yep.
That's not what we're building.
I'm kidding, Rob.
They're not going to build it. So, I'm sorry, Susan?
Yeah.
I mean, that up there is a 40B, the townhouses, and it was done as a 40B, I think largely because our zoning was impossible to deal with. So we actually got a very good development that was actually reasonably priced. I mean, today those units, I was just on Realtor, and they're like, $650, which is not crazy town. So I can understand why they go through 40B, particularly back when I was on the zoning board, and it was very, very difficult to develop in Norfolk. So the other problem is this is going to come up at like 9:10 or 9:15 on town meeting night. All right, even at 2 minutes an article and 15 minutes for the budget, we're going to be doing this with 7 people. What's the rush? Can you do it in the fall? When we do bylaw changes?
That might be a question to apply to the next article as well, just to keep that in mind.
Yeah, so we can talk about that a little bit. So our deadline is December 31st, 2024. So
That's the state
That's the state-
MBTA deadline.
That's the MBTA,
Okay.
yeah. The thought process going in is this is a weighty topic, and to wait essentially to one town meeting before the deadline could be a little bit risky in terms of, so if you don't comply, then there's the ability to, there are grant funds that we would not be eligible for. And we didn't touch on those yet, but I was going to touch on that in the next
We'll
one.
get to those in a sec.
Huh? We'll wait to those, but yeah.
But for the inclusionary zoning,
There is
it
a,
doesn't make any sense to, I understand you have to change it. The MBTA thing requires the changes, so.
Right.
Is that incorporated into it's incorporated into the zoning bylaw that appears before? What happens if Article 25 either loses or doesn't get dealt with, but Article 26 does?
so we'll still have to address the inclusionary piece.
But is it in the MBTA bylaw?
It's a separate, so on the warrant, the inclusionary is completely separate, so theoretically, the town could vote down the inclusionary and pass the MBTA.
And it still would be out of compliance?
It still would be out of compliance, but there's time to address it, because we're not till December.
They have to change it to 10%.
Well, wait a minute, no. It has to be 10% within the MBTA's district.
That's what I'm saying, yeah.
Yeah.
Right, and the second bylaw will create 10% in the MBTA district. So it overrides the base
No,
zone.
it's embedded into the first bylaw. So if hypothetically, let's say the arguments don't prevail in terms of this townwide provision, then there's really 2 options essentially. One is to try to do an economic feasibility and demonstrate that our requirement is, could stand the test of economic feasibility, or create just the inclusionary for the MBTA with these provisions. The other one could remain the same.
I'd be happy to offer a friendly amendment if that happens, just to let you know. Because we won't know until 9:15.
Right.
Yeah, we will not.
Well, could we?
No, and that's actually a good alternative. If 25 doesn't pass, 26 cannot stand on its own legs. 'cause
We'd
it's
have
out
to
of
do an amendment
compliance.
to it in the fall.
So the friendly amendment, yeah, we'd have to do something in the fall, or
Right.
a friendly amendment in May would at least completely codify 26. And it,
Just to be clear, to say Article 25 not passing means the bylaw stays in as it is.
Yeah, it stays in as
Right?
is.
That's
Yep.
very.
Right, yeah.
With
Yeah,
the 20%.
yep.
Stays tiered.
Yeah, right.
It stays the way it
Stays
is.
tiered, right, okay.
Right.
right. It stays tiered, but 26 does not, 26 is referencing
Right.
really 25,
Right.
which means it's out of compliance
Well, couldn't
for the
20
MBTA.
couldn't
It's an overlay
26
district.
in B1 small
saying.
b underlying zoning say, everything's in, all the respective underlying zoning districts are remain in full force except for, we had a little thing that says, except for affordability, which will be 10 units per whatever,
Yeah, so
or 10%.
I think it's a fair question to ask with council in terms of if there was an amendment
Go ahead.
for May, whether that would be in scope. If not, then the alternative would be to go back in the fall and make an amendment to the MBTA. If it were to pass, it has its own piece, so the inclusionary stays as is. And then it does, the MBTA would override our inclusionary, but have its own provision.
Practically, you guys have closed the hearing on this and voted on it,
Yes.
on both of these.
Both
Yes.
of them, yep.
So it has to be outside your process.
Yes.
Okay. Ken?
So, I know going on board here, but on 26, I don't see the race to get this done at Springtown meeting because it's already now in the process of being litigated by other communities. So, other communities where I'm involved with, or I'm on committees for this, we're slow playing it and waiting till fall town meeting to see where this litigation leads to. Deadlines get extended. Does this thing go away? Does this thing get worse? Is grant money actually at risk? Can the governor actually do that? Versus, if we don't pass this, we lose grant money. It's knee jerk. So, and if we don't pass this, we're not eligible for grant money. We don't have to pass it now. So I just, especially where one ties to the other, to me, it seems like if it's not going to pass now, it's not going to pass in the fall anyway. So we can do we're going to lose all grant money and be insolvent, but it's either going to pass or it's not. It doesn't matter if it's spring or fall. We're going to have the same argument, hey, grant money, this and that, but we might not have that money because litigation might have gone through, things might have changed, injunctions, that sort of thing. So there's a lot of moving pieces with this outside of Norfolk. So rushing to adopt this and then something changes in September, an injunction gets put in, and now we've adopted something that maybe we didn't need to rush to. That's just...
So, why don't, if everyone's done with 25, why don't we turn to 26 so you can address that question as part of your presentation? Does that work for you guys?
Yep.
Okay. Thank you.
Yeah, it's
No,
out
no,
of order,
that's a good- it's a
but where
really,
one affects
you know,
the
it's
other, it
it's
might
an
as well,
important
should the
question.
whole package be...
No, it's exactly on point.
Through the chair, would you allow a couple comments from the public on the...
Yeah. On the 25?
On the inclusionary zone?
Yes, please, Peter.
I'm just going to use the mic.
Yep.
It work. Oh, turn these on.
You can sit at the table if you want, Peter. That mic works. The one on the table.
All right, just on a couple of comments that they made regarding the 40B development. He said that we grow farther away from our housing quota in 40B. But if the 40B, if there's 40 units at 25%, we actually get closer to our 10%. Would that be correct? Because that's what I thought I heard you say.
So there are more affordable units, so we do get more, but then when the census count gets redone in 2030, those market rate ones get added to the denominator, so.
Well, they do, but at the 20% count, right? Right. Just so
No,
I understand
well,
that.
75,
Okay.
those 75 get added to the
Yeah, but
denominator.
the 40 houses that are built are
Yep.
assessed at 25%, so we actually grow closer to the 10%. Everybody understand that? Okay, thank you. Then we'll talk about the Hill Street development. That was 18 houses or dwelling units that were built at 10%. So that's one affordable unit. So that goes on the first 10. And when a development's done like that, the other 8 go in our market rate column, which reduces our 10%, just so we're clear on that. And then I think Norway Farms was 14 units, and we received payment in lieu of, on the 10%, I believe. So there would actually be 4 units that go in our market rate column So we lose again there. I'm just showing you how we lose on 10%, especially on fractional units.
Which is why I think they do a round down under the proposed inclusionary, so that 14 and 18 would actually require 2 units instead of 1, so you always get above the 10% floor. Is that right?
Well, we were trying to round up at 5 and above so that we get more. But I think the only fair way for my advocating for more affordable housing and for their position for going back to 10% is for the town to do an economic feasibility analysis. That would resolve whether or not it's affordable on both sides. So that's what I recommend. Thank you.
Thank you, Peter. Article 26.
I'll let Rich
So
give the highlights on that one.
do you want me to?
Do you have something?
Yeah, I do, yeah. Just need to, if I could share my presentation.
Should be.
So I'll go through, there's quite a few slides here, so we can go back and forth, but in terms of, so just kind of, probably should have had this in first compared to the inclusionary bylaw, but essentially, the MBTA's Community 3A section of 48 is a 50-acre multifamily high-density zoning district at 15 units per acre that is open to families with no age restrictions, which was enacted in 2020, signed into law in the beginning of 21. From the enactment of the statute, the Department of Housing and Community Development at the time, now HLC, has put out guidelines in terms of how to interpret the statutory requirement of 3A. And from that, there was a period where all communities, including Norfolk, actually had written to DHCD at the time, because if you remember going back in 2021, and I have a slide here about our B1 changes that we did in 2021, didn't seem to be fair in terms of how they were going to try to apply this guidance. And Norfolk and a whole bunch of other towns said, hey, can you consider this, consider that, consider that. Some considerations were made, but certainly not all the ones that many cities and towns have had. So I'll get to that. This is the, in terms of this slide, is the overall MBTA communities that would in the, which is the service district for MBTA that are
Rich, it didn't change the slide.
Oh, that's.
Yeah, that's, you're not.
Why did it do that? Is it because I wasn't?
Yeah, just stay on that screen.
Okay, all right. Sorry.
Well, you
about
got to
that.
share it again.
Yeah, okay. That's odd. Huh? Okay. I guess I'm not gonna be able to go through slideshow view, sorry. So anyway, this map here is the cities and towns that are subject to the MBTA communities.
And what makes them subject to it?
They're,
Not just obviously having a station located in your.
yeah, so for us, it's because we do have a station, but some of them are adjacent towns, so not all of them have a station. So
And
for
adjacent
example,
is sharing a border, or what's adjacent?
adjacent to the, so Rentham, for example, they don't have a station, but they're an adjacent community to Norfolk and Franklin that has a commuter rail.
The sharing border, Plainville isn't, for instance, because they don't share a border with, well, they probably do on the other side.
So the oddity, you see then there is a donut hole. Avon,
They escaped it.
so Avon is kind of in the middle. There are some donut holes, cities and towns. So so when they did this act, it was based on the MBTA service district at the time, so.
Yeah.
So in terms, those are the communities subject to it. So I did mention before, it's not a production mandate. It's to set the table in terms of the zoning to allow for multifamily development. It's not related to 40B at all. As I mentioned previously, our deadline is the end of December of this year, 2024. So the area size is 50 acres. 750 units is unit capacity that is also required. In the state's wisdom, if you took the formula that they had, they basically created a ground floor. So if they applied the math for us as being a commuter town, our total unit capacity would have been much lower. But instead of doing that, they create, no, everybody's gonna be 750, whether you're, regardless of your dwelling count. So anyway, the zoning has to be able to accommodate 750 units in terms of overall capacity. Has to be at least 18 acres per acre. 15 units per acre. I did touch on this a little bit already, but here's just some of the towns and cities that apply to the district. There we are.
What, can you go back? Yeah. What is that showing us?
That's just us. I put a little star there.
Oh, what's the color differentials? That's what I'm asking.
Yellow's
The type of service.
Yeah, those
All
are
right, thank you.
adjacent.
I can't see that. Oh, it's right there. Never mind.
And those classifications are actually statutory
Correct.
for
Yep.
purposes of
This act,
charging fees to
yes,
cities and towns.
which is what they use for this,
Yeah.
who is subject to it.
All right. Thank you.
So this is, well, I think we probably touched on this a little bit, but I can always go back, but, so again, acted in 21, there are, if you see on the screen, there are funding sources in terms of that are directly related to the statute, which is, 50 million for transit-oriented housing, neighborhood stabilization, climate resiliency.
Have they overlaid an income rider on those yet? Generally available to everyone who's included? The three sources of funds that you...
Yeah.
Meaning,
Yeah.
we're not going to be less eligible because we have a higher
No,
per capita
no.
or anything like that?
No.
Okay.
I kind of touched on this, but, so it is not, so the Wetlands Protection Act, the development does have to comply with that, as well as Title V too, just so those things aren't overridden, which means something in terms of us. This is, I just put in a slide just to give you a sense of a development in terms of units per acre, just to get a flavor of what it may look like.
Rich?
Yeah.
So the one behind, geez,
The other side of the
Frank
tracks.
Rose's house, what's that density, for instance?
There's 32?
32 per acre?
30.
Well, no, it's 32, 7.5 acres
Yes.
there.
Okay, so it's 5-ish.
Yeah,
Yeah, 5 acres.
yep. So in terms of grants that are tied to this, one is we did apply a few years ago for the wastewater master plan for town center. We did that through the Housing Choice Grant. That grant is tied to if we're not compliant, we wouldn't be eligible going forward if we don't comply. The Mass Works grant that we got for Lawrence Street Causeway a few years ago, that's another grant program that's directly tied to compliance or non-compliance. There is another grouping of grants that are consideration in terms of compliance with housing choice or not, in terms of whether you comply or not. One of those, if you see there, is the one in the far bottom right-hand corner. That's an open space acquisition grant that potentially we certainly may consider down the road. I think it would be, I'm gonna skip ahead a little bit just to give you to the slide. I think this one's important to this discussion. So when we did the B1 zoning, we had more than 50 acres in terms of, within the proximity of the commuter rail station, but we don't meet the unit capacity numbers that are required from the housing choice guidelines. In addition to that, if you recall, we did not allow, I'll call it by right, multifamily development. Our bylaws say you can do mixed use, but you can't do standalone residential. So because of those provisions, our zoning that we did in 21 doesn't count. They came out with a mandatory mixed use opportunity for towns whereby you could lower your unit capacity number from that 750, but we don't, I did apply, we were turned down. The principal reason why we were turned down is we require parking for non-residential space for commercial. Their requirement for mandatory mixed use, to be able to be eligible, you have to require no parking.
So it works in urban settings, but not anywhere else.
Yeah.
Thank you.
It works in urban settings. So, had this discussion and said, again, we're, with the state, we're doing good work, but again, it doesn't fit. And as you kind of see, one size really doesn't fit all. But anyway, so we did try that as well. I want to get to this, we looked at inside town center originally when we hired Horsley and Witten to take a look at it, assess it earlier in this past year. And actually it's almost a year ago now, but come up on it. And then, so they looked at this, and then they looked at, as part of the guidance, you can have an area outside the half-mile radius around MBTA. So we looked at potential options in terms of the Palmville area. One thing that's really important I want to emphasize is that the zoning overlay district sits on top of uses where there is development. There are housing that's there today. There are other type of uses there today. So it's completely within the guidelines to be able to do that. So it's not as if you have to have this overlay district sit over vacant land that's going to be shovel ready to go for development. So you'll see there is some vacant land, but there is many areas that are already, there's existing housing. What the consultant was tasked with was to use our setbacks, our height requirements, to keep consistent with that, and then put it through the model, see what we could come up with in terms of unit capacity. Because of that, the overall area is going to be larger than 50 acres. So it is 80 acres in total between the two areas, but we kept 30,000 square feet minimums. We kept lot coverage the way it is, frontages. The only thing that building height at 3 stories, the thing that does change is the units per acre. So that was one. We also have buffer requirements that we kept in there as well. Oh, you want me to go back?
Yeah. Where's the unit per? So we're required to allow 15 units per acre.
That's what the statute said.
What is the B1 prior to changing?
Prior to change is 16 units per acre.
So what did you have to change?
So
it also included commercial on the first floor.
It did, yeah. So that was not eligible. So that knocked us out.
Yeah, that was the problem.
That's the problem.
That knocked us out.
So how come you? Okay.
So you have to allow for it's an overlay district, but it's standalone residential. We could see something where it might be commercial and residential.
Can we go back to the B1?
Sure.
Because I think that's where the question was. And just walk through this. So
Sure.
the things that would have to change is the setback.
Nope, this is all staying. So we're keeping the front yard setback, the minimum side yard, rear, those are.
Okay, so let's look at what needs to change then, I guess.
The only thing that needs to change is the dwellings per acre. So we're 18 units per acre is being proposed.
And what is it currently?
It's 16 units per
They
acre.
only require 15.
Right,
They only require 15, but we have, if you see here, we have, so for example, we are limiting building footprints. So those kind of underlying zoning requirements is impacting the overall unit capacity. So we had to up it, so that way you comply. I'll get to.
All right, so you're using less space, so you have to have more units.
Yeah,
It's not, what did you say, 80 acres?
80 acres in total. I'm just gonna jump ahead and I can certainly come back, but I'll show you. So this slide kind of, oh, that's not the one I wanted to show you. No, let me go back, sorry. Essentially, if you took the B1 zoning was at 14.2 units per acre in the model, and then outside was, I think it was 16. 16. But you had to achieve overall greater than 15 units or better. So instead of being razor, because there are towns, as they are submitting them, they really are scrutinizing the underlying zoning in relation to the unit capacity to make sure it complies. So we wanted to create a little bit of buffer in terms of units per acre, dwellings per acre, so that we don't end up some provision knocking out that unit capacity. Because this is going to go through, the AG reviews it in terms of compliant, and then the Housing Livable Communities Department will look at it too. They're going to look at our Excel spreadsheet model that this was built on and make sure it meets their guidelines. So it has two arms, if you will, in terms
They
of.
won't look at it until we pass it.
They're not gonna.
Right.
We are gonna submit it to them ahead of time to see if we can get comments ahead of time.
Yeah.
There's no guarantee that
All right.
we'll get them, but. So I wanted to, so this area represents what is proposed for we're calling it the Town Hill Overlay District, so try to come up with something, but we came up with Town Hill. But so you can see what's underlying it, and, you have the condominiums up on the hill, which were a previous 40B project. You do have the Village of Norfolk, which is across the train tracks, that's in
We're
it.
including both of those.
Yeah, and then Boyd's Crossing is included. So, as you drill down, the potential build-out, or real build-out, I guess you say, is probably not anywhere near it could be, because we already have housing in it. Asterisk comment, that is permissible though, just so we're clear about that. Good, that is what is allowable in terms of.
Could you go back to that map, Rich?
Yeah, sure. Yeah. The green is excluded areas, just so you know, so those are municipal, so you have to, there's a, so the one across where Village of Norfolk.
I'm having a hard time reading the map, is basically almost, and I don't want to get up and stand in front of the TV, so.
You zoom in,
What is the pink
bottom right.
circle mean anything?
Yeah, I think it's a half-mile radius.
That's the whole B1. It's a perfect circle?
No, that's
No,
the
no.
half-mile radius from.
Oh, it's a half-mile radius. Thank you.
Yeah, is that a little bit better? See it?
Yeah, that's better. Yep.
Not perfect, but better.
Sorry, I
Yeah,
can't,
that's the half mile.
can't read any of these,
The
so.
district is the rectangle we're looking at?
It's the properties that are outlined in green, orange, sorry.
Orange, okay, thank you.
Orange.
Sorry.
The areas that are diagonally hatched with green, that is exclude the land.
And you're able to, it's a lot by lot thing then, essentially? You're excluding those lots from being in the zone?
No, we're well, actually, it's.
Well, they're excluded by
Some of it's
definition,
lots.
right?
Huh?
They're excluded by definition. It's not
They're
that they're excluding them.
lands,
It's
yeah. So wetlands.
municipal land, wetlands.
Okay.
Yeah, wetlands is excluded.
We're not
Town
gonna
hall is
Turn the
excluded.
third floor into apartments or anything?
What's that?
Never mind.
No. So, and because of that, that kind of then backs into that model that I talked about, so that's why it's a
Yeah.
little bit bigger. So what I was saying earlier, the orange area on the other side of the train tracks on Rockwood Road, that is 7, almost just under 8 acres, so you can have a separate floating area like that within the overlay district. The ones that you see, they do touch on Main Street from the fire station across. So that meets the provision of contiguity. There is another provision, but. So the takeaway, I know you had raised a question. So we had reached out to the consultant that prepared this, Horsley and Witten, to say, hey, there's some towns that are bumping up against this. How do we look in terms of, is this going to pass muster when it goes to housing livable communities? And their answer back to us is because a few things. One is we have area that's bigger than the minimum, so it gives us a little bit of buffer. And again, we're above in terms of 18 units per acre, and we have more than, congruent areas that are above those recommendations. So I will say we did it more conservatively to try to,
Okay.
now, the state will probably say nobody's perfect, but, we're as close as we hopefully can be. I want to get to, and then this is the other one, which is in the Pondville area. So, Peter, we were all talking about it before. This property right here is the one that's 7 Hill Street, which is the 18 duplex units that are under construction right now. This is a single-family house, a warehouse, and then another office building on Hill Street. This one here, there's a single-family home. There's already the townhouses that are on Valley Street. This property is vacant. This property here is vacant. Oh, can you see my cursor?
Yeah, I can see it. We can see it.
Okay. I will tell you that property is under consideration for multifamily under our zoning bylaw. This is one of those properties, though, that they're waiting to see the outcome of the inclusionary bylaw. If it remains tiered up,
How many units are they looking for there?
they're proposing 21 units.
Through the normal process?
Through the normal process, yes. They could get more under housing choice because it's 18 units per acre.
Is
But, go ahead.
that stuff at the back of the property as well?
But there's wetlands back there,
Yeah.
yeah. And the septic system is
Right.
limiting factor. Good.
Mr. Chair.
Rob?
Why not extend that one parcel north?
Wetlands.
We
That
don't really
nice
gain-
big, no, there's a lot of other stuff other than wetlands up there. That's Southwood.
Yeah, so,
Why not capture Southwood in there?
It's got its own set of issues, Rob.
I know, but, I mean, why not?
Actually, that's a really good point. Why not?
Why not? You could either have the dilapidated wreck you have now, or you could have the dilapidated wreck you have now with additional zoning.
it's an arguable point. But I will tell you that the owners, GFI Partners, that acquired the property, their inclination is to move towards industrial, commercial development and not housing. And so I think we're working towards having an upcoming on that, but I think,
Yeah.
I think getting some commercial industrial would be valuable for the town.
When we were looking at also trying to keep it as small as possible, keep the, we didn't want to expand it more than needed.
I think Rob's point, you do that and don't do any of the other stuff.
No, it's not. It's not.
Well, we can't, we
sort
couldn't
of.
necessarily do that.
I'm kidding. I'm not kidding, but I'm.
Well, and wasn't there a certain ratio? The out parcel had to be a certain percentage of the.
Yeah, it can only be 40%.
Only below a certain percentage.
Yeah, so
Yeah.
I think Southwood put us over that threshold also.
Okay.
So what's the acreage downtown? What did we hit in the B1?
The proposal is 60 acres,
Yeah.
and this is 20 over here.
So there's no other requirements for this out parcel, like in terms of accessibility to the commuter rail or anything like that?
No, no.
This is, so this is one of the pieces of law, though, that if the court were to say the state is vastly overreached, this would get kicked out. The the 50 acre might get kicked out because it don't say 50 acre in the law. It says reasonable size, which is the same for Plymouth as it is for Norfolk. And Plymouth's like, what, 3 times our size? It's absurd. It was huge regulatory overreach. From an administration that should have known better, that I worked for. So, I don't know what I'm saying. Roll the dice with just C1 and leave it at that. I mean, B1? B1, not C1.
And it's not, it's just to be, you exempted some properties in the B1. It's not the whole B1. It's B1 minus. Is that why, what does the B1 out mean? Is there a zone called B1 out, or are you just calling it?
It's an inner and an
Okay.
B1 in and out.
It's both.
It is.
Okay. Recognize my strength is not the zoning stuff.
So if we fail because of the mixed use requirement we have, right? I mean, frankly, the development we had in B1 is all residential because they went through 40B, so they don't comply by that anyway.
Right.
And we have been spectacularly unsuccessful in getting any other commercial development, even with a sewered lot, right? So what is the harm of saying, okay, fine, on these other parcels, because the Wayside buildings are going to sell themselves for residential, and the guy who owns the KMK Cleaner building in Franklin there, he ain't going to sell his building for residential. Okay, so this is what we got downtown. Give them by right residential at 15 and be done with this. I mean, you're almost saying that anyway, because you're putting this in the district.
We are, but we did exclude the properties that you're talking about, with the goal of trying to get commercial and residential.
And there is some argument to not having all apartment buildings down here, so.
Well, if you did have apartment buildings down here, you would have commercial development.
Yeah.
I mean, that's the thing. You would redevelop that building that, Daly's is attached to, and you get a hybrid use.
If you had more residential, that would drive more commercial.
Yeah,
We'd finally have a chicken, so we might get an egg.
exactly.
Something's better than nothing.
Yeah.
Or tax revenue, but then
All right,
we'll just have to have more services for it, and we'll spend the
But
money.
going back to Ken's point, this is in the courts. Lord knows what's going to happen. And it's going to be 9:30 at night on Tuesday, and everyone's going to be ticked off, and we're not really going to have a conversation about this.
Let's get everyone fired up with the inclusionary thing and then take this one.
Let's do that first, before the budget.
I wonder if we could.
Well, of course you could. You could.
I wonder if a certain person who runs the meeting would agree to that.
All you have to do is rise and make, I move to put this first, and then I think it's a vote.
The oral arguments from Milton's lawsuit are in October, so the SJC,
They're not
I don't
gonna
think
settle
they're
it
not going to have an answer.
by the middle of November.
They won't have an answer unless if Milton gets an injunction.
Right.
Then there's a different situation, but.
Right.
And, okay, we got the 2 grants. But have we ever gotten any other grants in those programs?
But we are trying to get more grants.
We've been trying.
But we're trying harder now.
No, I mean, so some of the work that DPW is doing for Seekonk Street is in these grants that they're going, so the MVP program, that's a grant that's tied into it. There is consideration right now, there's a discussion with the select board, you probably remember, to try to see if we can then connect to purchase some sewer flow from MCI Norfolk to bring sewer to the center of town. That grant that would help fund that is the one that's directly tied to this. That was where you can bring in, where there's millions of money potentially eligible for to do that. I think you've heard, we did get our congressional earmark towards sewering the center of town. Did you hear that, or, I think you're aware.
No.
Okay, well.
I thought they didn't do earmarks anymore.
I guess you heard it first. We put in a request for $5 million for center of town, and we were awarded $960,000, so just under $1 million towards that. So we're in that game, and actually today we met with a consultant to consider going to Mass Works right now to fund some of the seed money for that sewer, to do some feasibility work. So we're not, it's not as if Norfolk's not into these grants. In addition to that, we are trying to redevelop Southwood Hospital site. And there's other pots of money, like there might be other towns that aren't really trying to go for these pots of money, but we have received that money before, and we are trying to go for those pots of money. So there is real dollars in terms of us. And one more point that I'm hoping tomorrow I can report back to you. Well, I'll save it for later. I should have pulled it out
like that.
I was so excited. I got too excited, but anyway.
You can't tease us like that.
Well, we might have gotten the money.
I might not read my email
All right,
till
listen.
next week, so.
We might be getting the money for the Metacomet Greenway.
But we don't have a plan yet.
But that's the money to fund the design, permitting, and engineering for that, which is over $1.5 million.
One of those zones touches the Greenway.
Yes, it does.
Right.
It's gonna have a beautiful bridge.
It does. Exactly.
It's a really nice bridge.
And that gave us a little bit of, we made that point. So my point is, Milton got money taken away from them, and
It was a seawall, though, a rather inexpensive seawall. So it was on the Neponset River. So it was a dramatic. They lost. I mean,
Climate change, man.
yeah, it's not like they lost every piece of grant money they got. There's been a lot of media hype.
I bet you Milton gets more grants than we do.
I understand. But when you work inside the building, you're trying to help fund these things for the town residents, and there's grants available, and we're going for them. If we get that legs cut out from under it, it's kind of tough. We're trying to help supplement, bring money in, so it's not on the taxpayers. So that's the big picture.
Brian.
So one question is, we can get that density with these lots that are not connected to sewers? They can do that with septic?
We're probably not going to be able to do it with
Right,
sewer.
okay.
Yeah.
It was like, it didn't make any sense that we could get that density.
No.
And that's,
No, that's where it says like the real density is not, because you got.
And the state doesn't care that we pass zoning laws that no one could ever build because there's no place to poop. Like,
Well, the thing is, it's by right, which means they don't have to build 18 units. They could build 9 units and do a.
okay.
Well, that's why there's a lot of articles now about like, what is this really all about in terms of real production? Because it's,
Yeah. That all makes
But that's
sense.
another discussion.
And then, is there a list of what the zoning changes in the B1 district would be? That we can just see that list of what the changes would be?
Yeah, do you have the,
It's, I mean, beyond the article itself.
Yeah, just like a summary.
Just like a summary.
Because you went
Oh,
through
yeah, I'm
all
sorry.
the,
Yeah.
they were there, I think I saw them.
Basically, it's like.
I mean, you listed a bunch of things that aren't changing. I guess my question is, do you have a list of things that are changing as well?
so the only thing that's changing is the units per acre. 18 units per acre.
But that won't meet the inclusionary requirement, which is handled in 25. So to get us back to the discussion of passing 26 doesn't actually get us in compliance because there's a requirement that is not part of Article 26.
Correct.
Right.
But that's the only change is the density.
The density.
Well, and the
mixed use.
the requirement for mixed use.
The B1,
I mean, you're
yeah, the B1.
Yeah, let me get
No, the big change is you're not requiring a special permit. That's a bigger change than the
Right,
density.
and also in the B1 inner, there's a requirement for mixed use, and this.
Gets rid of that, right.
This gets rid of that, so that requirement goes away, the parking requirement goes away, and the dwelling units changes.
Okay,
So
those three things.
those three things.
the
The
parking.
density, the parking, and mixed use.
No, parking stays the same. It's 1.5 per unit.
No,
But we don't, right, so explain the parking again. Why it's, so the parking right now, we have to have,
If you wanted to get credit for mandatory mixed use, you would have to not require parking for.
Okay.
right,
Okay.
it's because of the mixed, because the mixed use is going away, and it would be all residential, the parking stays the same.
Okay.
So the change to the B1 is really the 18 units per acre.
Okay.
And residential by right by itself.
Would you mind preparing a fact sheet that's got that written down?
Yes,
For
yes.
town meeting?
Yep.
Thank you.
Because people will be underwhelmed at the change. It's not a huge change.
Because they're going to say it's a big thing, but I guess if your point is it's going to change those two things, let's focus on that and not focus on.
And we can provide that for the B1 and also the C1.
Same one,
Yeah.
yep, same one for the C1.
Yeah,
Uh,
yeah.
I did want to say that oh, sorry.
That's right. I thought I was following all of this until the parking comment.
You don't have to worry about parking because that's only if you want to have mandatory mixed
this
use,
is
but
so-
we don't want to.
So just let me say this, make sure I'm following correctly. My understanding of this whole thing with the MBTA was heavy density housing near MBTA stations to increase usage of public transportation and reduce reliance on driving. That was my understanding of what this really is all about. So can you,
Allegedly.
It's more about housing production.
It's housing production.
Yeah, and they're using the T as a hook.
what's really behind it, at least that's my understanding of how this is being sold / shoved down your throats, right? So in that context, I maybe misunderstood. If we are not doing mixed use and we're just doing residential, there is or there is not a parking requirement?
There is a parking requirement.
And what is that parking requirement?
It's the same as it is today, 1.5 parking spaces per dwelling unit.
How are we going to fit that many parking spaces with that many dwelling units? Is that an unanswerable question? Is that where this thing just becomes like silly?
No, so that was built in the model as well, so that parking requirement.
It's why they have to have more acreage.
That's what pushed the acreage larger than 50 acres because.
And that parking requirement is from us, or that's part of the MBTA requirement?
That's our existing.
So that's not what the MBTA thing is not requiring parking. That's
They don't care about parking.
Well, that's why I got confused.
Yeah, they don't
Okay,
care.
that's our town desire to have parking. That's not coming attached with.
No.
Can you put parking in the setbacks?
Okay, I got it.
You said you had a 50-foot buffer between residential districts and the.
You can't put it in the buffer, the residential buffer, you can't. But
So you couldn't put behind your building?
you could, as long as you have the 50 foot.
But then you have to have your buffer beyond the parking lot.
But the buffer's only on the edge of the zoning district.
Yeah, where it butts the residential
I was
district.
just curious.
But if
Not on
we
each
changed
lot.
it, if it was changed to, you could park there, it could shrink this thing down to the 50 acres probably, right?
Well, maybe.
Shave that 10 acres off?
It could, although I will say that there was a lot of discussion when we did the B1 to keep that.
There are
But I mean, it could
a
change.
lot of
I
houses
mean,
right on top of the district, so, you know. Yeah.
We had street parking, we can get into the whole traffic cone savers and street cleaning every
Meters, quarters.
every third Thursday.
So, just in defense of this law, I mean, Norfolk is the kind of community that should have this law. We have a downtown train station. In the olden days, we'd have a dense downtown because you'd walk to the train station to get wherever. All right, that makes sense. This thing makes no sense for like Rentham. If I was Rentham, I'd be apoplectic about the thing, or Millis, you know. But for us, this is a no-brainer, and it's what we've been trying to do with the downtown since like 1980 something when they first rezoned downtown for density. So, I mean, I applaud that. Some of their details are stupid, and a lot of the details that are stupid, they made up in regulation. But, I'm completely in favor of this.
All right. Thank you, Rob.
I'm sorry.
No.
The Novocaine's starting to wear off. I'm getting grumpy.
Rob had it pretty cold earlier.
So yes, on the fact sheet, the planning board is going to do similar we did in the B1, host some virtual info sessions.
I think you're gonna have, that presentation you have has lots of information in it, but
I know.
Break it
I
down.
understand.
I mean, the whys and why nots are like the very first question out of everyone's mouth. And I told you this in November, Rich, is why.
Yeah. And we intend to, this is a bit much, but.
Right. No, I appreciate it's more that the whys, the why nots, the what is and what.
Yeah, we need a
Question about the whole Pondville thing is going to confuse people, so it confuses me still, so. It confuses me that it's allowable, given what they're trying to do, so.
It's more than a half mile.
I agree.
Yeah.
We were confused as well, but it was allowed, so we're like,
Yeah.
all right,
No, I
so
understand.
let's make it work.
So the only fundamental change that we're really making to be in compliance is that the issue of the commercial
Yeah.
on the first floor
Yep.
and going from 14 to,
Let's-
no,
Well, ours Right now, it's 16, but just in the center of town,
Just
to 18.
B1.
16 to 18 in B1 and in the little one down there.
in Palmville.
That's really it. There's 2 bullet points to this whole thing. The rest of this is minutia.
Well, it's a big change for Pondville, right? I mean, that underlying zoning is different.
Yeah, because it is a little bit higher density than the multifamily that's down there today. Yes.
But like for downtown, it's no.
Does anyone have any more questions?
So it almost doesn't even matter if the state, what goes on, it's not, it's just, there's really not much fundamental change here.
Hold on a sec. Melissa, you all set?
Yeah, I'm all set, thanks.
Thank you. Peter, if you could, I don't take the arguments apart. Yeah. Okay.
Affordable housing. Sorry. The special permits being taken away, and I believe the overseer of how the affordable housing is going to be handled is the Norfolk Municipal Affordable Housing Trust, or the director, is that correct? And some of the other towns I've seen that it's the building commissioner that oversees how that's done. So my question is, why did we choose the affordable housing to oversee it and versus...
Hey, Sue?
The building inspector will always...
Sue?
The building inspector would always be in town. And my question, would the director always be in town?
So the building commissioner still will oversee the zoning in terms of enforcement end of it, but the administration side of it is through the affordable housing director, because there are requirements that need to be met in terms of affordable housing. So I don't think the building commissioner is the person to do that, to read through, to check people's financial wherewithal. If we're fortunate that we have an affordable housing director, so that was the natural place to do it. I suppose in some other towns, it might follow the planner and the enforcement's under the building commissioner. But here, since we have that position, it seemed to make sense logically to. There is some pieces that it's kind of a shared. So some responsibilities of the Affordable Housing Trust in terms of voting the annual medium home sale price, that would then get fed into the planning board in terms of the permits. So it's really 3, well 4 actually, the building commissioner. So, yep.
All right. Sue?
Sure, I just wanted to add that there are certain certifications and requirements that both Mass Housing and HLC require for somebody to be able to certify an affordable buyer. And our building commissioner certainly could obtain those over time, but doesn't have them at this point. But it is a group effort.
Okay. All right. Thanks, gentlemen. Justin asked for an opportunity to come talk to us before the end of the meeting. He's upstairs, and I'm trying to find his... I've texted with him, and I just can't
There's another
find
planning board article.
Yeah, I was going to say.
Oh, Jesus, there is. Sorry.
There's this big ugly one.
Oh, yeah.
It has a lot of things
I
on it.
apologize. So we have a third zoning article.
So we have a third article, the use table. So that was something we voted on previously, put in. We've now put it into effect, and we found that we need to make some changes to that, some enhancements, some changes to that. You will see that the B4 and the C6 are added. They were not on there, they're added, so those 2 columns are all in bold, they're all 100% new. We then found that the C1 out.
C5 or C5 or
C5, I think. C5, I'm sorry, C5. And that, so C5 and B4, and then we found that all the C1 off-highway needed to be elaborated, and we needed to break those out. And so that's where you've got those new columns in there to specify that. And then there was a couple other little minor changes that we found. As we started putting this into use, we needed to make this right.
So, let me understand it correctly. The C1 stuff got new sub?
Yeah, we had to elaborate that. We'd expand it. It was not expanded before. So we needed to expand that out because when we put it into use, we started getting questions on this and we're like, yeah, we need to break this out and be more deliberate about how it's specified.
So are there any changes relative to what actually happens with the zoning here? I mean, or is this just sort of sorting it out, what we already do?
It's really just sorting out. I think there might have been one or two changes.
There are some.
There was a couple little.
There's some changes.
There was a couple
Yeah.
tweaks.
Okay. Expanding the siting of museums.
But the B4 and the C5 are all new, 100%
Yeah.
new. The C1, we expanded the C1 off highway. That's all expanded. And then there were a couple little minor changes.
Yeah, there are.
I'm looking, just because it's the first thing that, this sounds like a change. For the C1B, there's a no that's crossed out and it's a yes for open space, village greens and squares.
C1B, which page?
It's on, the first page. Very confused. I guess it's on the first page.
Trucks are allowed everywhere.
Yeah, so when we expanded that, because it was a yes in the C1A and some of the other ones.
Okay.
When we expanded it out, we found that it needed to be.
All right.
That was part of the problem.
Okay.
We had it all lumped together.
All right.
Mr. Chair?
Rob, do you have a question?
Yeah. So C5 is new,
Yes.
commercial 5.
Yep.
It's the exact same as C3.
Yep.
So now we have it, they're all those standalone districts, before it was C2, C4, C5, so it's on its own.
So what is going to be C5? Where was that before?
It was in the, it was lumped in with the C2, C3, C5. We got rid of C2 because C2 didn't exist anymore last year.
Right.
But, so instead of having C3-C5, we just replicated it, so it's its own.
Why not just make them both C3?
They are two different in there. They are two different zones.
They're not contiguous or anything?
They're not.
Didn't we used to have 3 Rs? Because the setbacks are different in the Rs.
We still have 3 Rs, but that's just dimensionally.
Okay, so you know.
Yeah, we don't need to touch that.
So this isn't inclusive of all zoning districts we have. Because you do have R1, R2, R3. You're not listing them because all the uses are the same and.
Yeah, the uses are all the same, right.
Okay.
Dimensionally, it's different.
Well, then by my argument, C3 and C5 are the same. Never mind. Because R2 is not all contiguous
But
with
we
R2.
also have a C4
No, I
and
know.
C6.
The only difference for the Rs are the dimensions.
There's something up here. They're creating all these new shadow districts. Something's going on.
Oh, jeez.
Well, I mean, come on, we're literally going to be doing this at 9:45, all right?
Yeah, but we did it last time at 9:45.
Yeah.
It's very important, though.
It was the last article last
Later than
time.
that, I bet.
Jonathan, yeah.
I'm sorry if this is a sidebar. I think I asked this last time and I've forgotten. Is this list some standard list of potential things that go on in the world, or is this curated for
No.
us specifically?
This is
in Norfolk?
homegrown.
This is in our article. This is
us.
Right,
But
so we came up with the list. Does this not seem over-engineered because 50% of these things
Because
don't
every time
exist?
somebody wants to do something, they add it into the list. And then they don't do
every
it.
town has one.
At one
Not every
point,
town.
like,
A lot of
Mechanical
towns have
Bulls
one.
was in here. I think that's
we took
gone
that
now.
out.
Yeah.
Interesting comment.
I took
Jonathan.
that out.
Actually, this is way less than we had before.
So, Jonathan, every town has some version of this. And some of them are one page because nothing happens in those towns.
Yeah, I mean, again, I'll make one comment, then we can move on, but in the spirit of making things simpler for everyone to understand, there's a couple line items in here which are no all the way across the board. Would it not be better to just strike that out entirely, remove it from the zoning regulations, and at the point in time in the future, someone needs to add back in an aviation field, for example, like we addressed it at that point? It just seems like this is really dense for someone to read and understand, and half of it has no bearing on life in Norfolk in 2024 at all.
I'm gonna, that
It's a sidebar,
comment is
yeah.
sort of outside the scope here, because this is the way we do business.
And sometimes you
in
want to say
most
no.
Planning.
I was going to say that. Sometimes you do specifically want to say no because it did come up previously and we were explicit about saying no.
Like, oh, it doesn't say I can't have outdoor storage of commercial vehicles in my front yard, so I'm going to do that. So we said, no, it's in here saying you can't.
I mean, you can't outlaw infinity either. I can find plenty of things that aren't listed here.
You can come very, very close.
I will say that,
And the aviation question can be when VTOLs come around, it could be in your backyard.
well, we did discuss that we are wrapping up that master plan this spring, and I think we'll probably be revisiting some of these points that you're making here that.
But I spend more time than I want looking at other towns' versions of these, and this is no less.
saying this is simple?
No more or less complicated than
This
This is
is miles better than where it was before we made the change.
yes. Thank you.
Used to be
Yeah,
3
it is-
tables.
It is a lot.
Joyce.
It's a lot easier to read and understand. And, and we found contradictions in different parts of the bylaws by making one table that identified those contradictions that we talked about previously.
I remember.
and cleaned up.
Okay, sorry, thank you.
Joyce.
Thank you. So the chart that we have, is it going into the warrant and being handed out, sent out? And are you also going to have handouts at town meeting where people can pick it up? Because I'm being selfish for this board, whoever is going to be presenting this particular article, that's a lot of stuff, so you guys are going to be doing a lot of talking.
So I'm somewhat excited. I'm excited to tell you that I threw out the notion of having this at the end of the warrant, so it will be in landscape format going to the voters, so they'll have it. It won't be a separate handout. Because we tried to put it in where it was order-wise, but it was portrait, just didn't work.
Right.
So it's going to
Be
be,
a map with the actual, the version of the map with what the districts are, because.
oh, for the other stuff?
No, for this, it was not a bad
With this, because you're
idea.
saying C1.
I don't know where the C1 is. I don't,
Yeah, the average person might be, well, where's
we can have
C1? You can have a marijuana store there. I want to know where that is. Did that change? They're going to probably see that on the map with the overlay.
We can do that.
So this makes my point. When you print that out in black and white on newspaper stock that we mail to people, B3 and B4 and C3 and C5 are the same zones. Everything's the same. But on this map, there's going to be all these lines, because you got to do a C3 over here and a C5 over. It just seems like it's going to be really, why are we making this more complicated? It doesn't need to be more complicated. Unless there is a reason to create the new B4 and C5, why are we doing this? Keep it simple.
There's got to be a difference.
There's no difference. If you look down the use table, are there dimensional differences in the two
There's a
districts?
difference between the B1 and the B4.
I'm talking B3 and B4.
So substantially B5 and C5?
B4 and B3 are the same, C3 and C5 are the same. So why can't everything that's in the new C5 just be in C3, and everything that's in the new B4 just be in B3?
So this leads me to my next comment.
Unless there's a dimensional difference.
This leads me to my next question/comment. You guys haven't had your public hearing on this yet, right?
We have not.
Next Tuesday.
Well, technically, it's still amendable. Sorry, Rob. And
Yes.
just something to keep in mind as you move forward on this. When are you having your public hearing?
Tuesday.
Are you voting on it that night?
That pretty much have to,
Yeah.
more or less.
Yeah.
Yeah, I know.
Have to, yeah.
When I got your notice of your original public hearing, I thought this was on it, and I wasn't paying strict attention, so.
So Rob, you're suggesting just to not add
Well,
this
there may be-
B4 and.
A, I may have missed something, okay?
I hear you, I understand.
B, there may be, because we do have a dimensional table as well. So there may be a dimensional difference that I'm not aware of, that there's frontage in B3 that's different from B5, for instance, or side setbacks are different, you know? So that would make sense why you'd have two districts. But if they're like, if they really are the same district in terms of everything, just keep them the same name.
Well, but that's a whole different, renaming the district is, I mean.
No, I think he's just saying, 'cause we're separating, keep them the same.
On the table, we could-
C3-C5, is that what you're saying, essentially?
Just one column, but call it B3, B3.
No, just have a B3.
Yeah, but
No, there are,
there is a B4 district, so we'd have to change the B3 district to make it change the B4 to make it a B3. That's a whole nother.
Okay, well,
That'd be a whole nother.
B4
Right.
is in bold, which you told us meant it's
So
new.
I'm going to cut you off.
It's new to the table. I'm sorry. It's not a new. It's not
not
new
new
to the
district,
table.
new.
I think we're getting way too into the
Yes.
details. These guys can take this back and think about it.
Okay.
As I just asked that they do.
Okay.
And we'll cut this off, is that okay?
That's fine with me.
All right. Unless anyone else says, go ahead, Chad.
So
Don't
that
pick
is
an
a-
argument.
No, that's a great point. No, I'm not getting that. Rob, that's a great point. I did say that B4 and C5 are new. They're not new districts. They're new to the table. So I appreciate you saying that because now I understand how
craziness I was
you
saying.
understood that. So
I thought you made them up out of whole cloth too, so.
no, I'm sorry. So they're new to the table, but they are not new districts.
Okay. Sorry,
So
my apologies.
those districts already exist. So this is great. We'll take that back to our meeting next week, and we'll even talk about it offline before the meeting of maybe we need to just have it just as one column. And, yeah.
And whoever gets to help you on this, we'll make sure you're communicating with them too, so.
Yep.
I mean, Joyce, to your point, Joyce, the person who's gonna carry it for us needs to have some better equipment. So, anyways, all right. Thank you. Peter?
Great feedback.
One more comment?
Yes.
In the B1 zone, home occupation is not allowed right now, and there's probably 145 homes in the B1. And I would hope that the planning board would consider changing that to a yes, that people could work from home, considering a lot of people do, a home occupation. The second observation I saw is you're adding food trucks across the board for all zones. I was hoping you could comment on that. And then I
can.
saw a scoreboard in there.
I can comment on the food trucks. We had one come to a party at for my daughter at her house. And I don't know what your thought process was, but if that was going to be prohibited, I think that's,
No, just asking.
yeah, I mean, they're not,
No, actually, the thought process with that is actually legalize it because it's been going on.
Yeah.
because I had somebody at my house.
I wasn't
8
thinking
years ago.
of you in particular, but there are several community events that have been going on for quite a long time in
So
town.
we didn't allow them at all before that?
Yeah,
The one that happened over here that I went to a couple times? Oops.
yeah, so we're catching up,
Oh, okay.
all right?
But I do think, I mean, I'm a food truck aficionado, and they don't park in neighborhoods where they're not going to do business.
I like coffee shops, and you can park a food truck in any of these commercial zones, but somebody couldn't open a coffee shop next to a business where there might be a draw to it. It seems a little strange.
No, they could sell coffee out of their
I
food
will
truck.
say that will
Flatten
be,
the tires, connect to the sewer.
the good news is that will be adjusted at the hearing next week on the coffee shop, so.
What about beer trucks? Because there are beer trucks at Town Hill too.
It's a whole different licensing scheme.
Yeah.
All right, I think,
That's interesting.
I started this, so I'll end it now. I apologize. Thank you, gentlemen.
Thank you.
Thanks.
We're getting a little punchy here.
No, that's the great feedback. No, I
So
appreciate
just in time for Justin.
Bakeries aren't allowed either. You can have a food truck.
That sells bakery goods. That's
So if you want a coffee shop that sells bacon.
House is
I'll
actually
turn this on
technically.
for you, all right? So you get some air?
No, we're fine. It's not. Is it? I don't know.
Some people turn red in there.
It might not be the hit temperature.
So I spoke with Justin about the idea that next week is our kind of wrap up. And I'm not going to tell him what I think we should hear. I think we should, if there's issues that one of you think we haven't heard enough from, or we didn't get the correct answers, I do think it would be, I do think there has to be some consideration of where the town is on the sediment dredging project. Because I'm getting mixed messages from employees and people who volunteer, so I want to know what's going on.
I listened to that conversation. I was there as part of that January meeting as well. It might be worthwhile, it's up to the board, or the committee, whether to bring the sponsor of that in for a conversation as well, because I don't know if you want to do that.
Is that the Friends group?
Yes.
I think I'd rather have somebody who's technical, because the Friends group was here last year and they didn't have any idea what we were asking about, so. And I think that's who's paying TRC? Who's an expensive consulting firm? You probably don't know the answer to that question.
I don't know.
I'm a deft amateur in this area, but I'm still an amateur, but Rob's sort of in the same boat in a lot of ways. An understanding of what the impacts of negative numbers in the second round of dredging is actually going to mean to the project and then to the town, depending on what goes on, would be a nice question to get answered. If there are high levels, Kaylin's mentioned the chromium that showed up in the original one. They haven't specified what it is yet. Technically, it could be hexavalent chromium, which is a pretty nasty piece of work. So I think any ability for us to ask somebody who's technical and knows this stuff would be helpful. As opposed to, Caitlin, she acknowledged this isn't her field of expertise, but.
I'll regroup with Caitlin and see if we can get someone with a more technical understanding, because I do know that group, I think, has talked with some groups at the state level, and I'm wondering if we could get maybe Zoom or something like that, where we could get more technical response.
Sure.
That's the only thing that I can think of.
Well, I'm wondering, did it go on the Rentham warrant last spring, and what did they do about
That's
it?
another
Or
question.
they
If they're not doing it, we're not doing it. So
Well, right, I wonder what they did and what they're talking about, and would that help? I guess
So
that's-
I think Cindy mentioned it and her hands up with maybe
Oh,
an
okay.
answer on that.
hi, Cindy.
Yep.
Please, if you could come back on screen to answer the question or ask a question.
I'm here, hang on, I'll
Yep,
put myself back on.
thank you.
Okay, I'm here, kind of, sort of. So first question was, who paid for the TRC environmental? My understanding as I'm looking at this is it was Friends of Mirror Lake who hired them and paid for them.
Do you know if that's is that a relationship? And you probably don't know, but if that relationship still exists, it would be nice if they could bring someone from that group to answer questions, even if they appear remotely.
Yes, I believe, and Justin can correct me, because he was at the January meeting, I was not, I was away. I believe someone from TRC was at the January meeting, but I may be mistaken.
Yeah, I believe so, Cindy. There was another gentleman that was with the leader of the Friends of Mirror Lake.
Yeah.
That's why I think that it might be prudent if those two people come at a minimum, because they were able, Caitlin had some technical questions as well, and there was the other gentleman, I didn't know him that well, that was able to communicate with her, so.
Yeah, there was Doug, who is the Friends of Mirror Lake representative that's been to us and been to advisory board last year. And I don't know the name of the TRC person, but I do know that he brought somebody in from TRC to that January meeting. And, I would have hoped that all of the questions that were raised, and I know DPW's questions were answered, I would have hoped that they had all been answered in January. And I would have hoped that if they weren't, there would have been follow-up, specifically probably from conservation to get the rest of the answers, but that didn't happen, so, I'm not sure what to say here.
I'm more of an amateur, I think, than you in this. But my question is, there are certain things, like if you dig and you find a problem, it's your problem to remediate. And they talked about the dredging, and if we don't find anything, we can get grants. But if we do find something, does that open us up to a liability to remediate?
There's some issue with dredge that's different from digging in your backyard, but I'm not
Right.
clear what.
And potential dredging is a phase 3, only if it passes phase 2.
I
Right,
think,
but
I
we're
think
doing the
Brian's
sampling
point,
now
if
as
we
phase
find
2.
something at the bottom of Mirror Lake that triggers a threshold from the DEP, are we
I
then
see.
actually responsible for remediating that?
Right.
That was one of the main questions we asked in January, and that we had asked, and I think that was one of the main things that Caitlin and the group had brought up. We didn't get a response back to that.
Okay. That's,
I see,
That's
okay.
not, that doesn't leave a good feeling.
yeah.
Right.
Yeah. Okay. So that's sort of, from what you heard tonight, that's where we're at on that. And I
Okay.
think Brian's question is valuable too. Rentham must have a warrant kicking around now for Springtown meeting.
My impression, and it's just what we were told again from Doug at Friends of Mirror Lake, was he didn't think it would go on the June, or whatever their spring warrant article is. There's 3 big lakes in Rentham, or 4, and that the bigger lakes that get more use, like Lake Pearl, Lake Archer, would probably take precedent over this, but that was just his opinion, so I honestly don't know if
I think it would
Rentham
be
will
easy
move
to
forward.
find
I'd be
out.
happy to chat with their CPC person and ask them if they put anything on the warrant, if you wish.
I spoke with the town administrator, Kevin Sweet at Rentham, and I don't think it's going on June as well. So I don't know if CPC...
We can confirm that. I mean, it would make,
But
I still want at some point, we're going to take a vote on this, but I still want. So I want answers to questions, but if we can't get them by next week and it's not going to be an issue for the other town, then let's not deal with it. But
Because even if we were to authorize it this year, if they're not taking a vote, if it doesn't come up in November, right, like.
Sampling's
it
not
would
gonna occur
maybe a
next
different
spring.
FY, yeah.
All right.
Just a thought, there is an alternative thought process that we could amend the warrant article to have the funds available only for 1 year. And then if Rentham doesn't act on their behalf next June, we just close the account,
We can talk about that.
make it go back, you know.
All right. Thank you, Cindy. So we've had 4 meetings where we've had substantive presentations. Was anyone, we did get some information from Blair. We had a bunch of questions for him 2 weeks ago, and we did get some responses. I haven't read the stuff he sent me today, but he sent everyone some stuff last week, and I know that somebody responded to him, but is there anything missing that people are thinking of? Anything, all right, of the articles that we're going to be discussing over the next couple of weeks, is there anything that people don't feel prepared to discuss?
Chairman, can I ask a question?
Yes. Go ahead.
Did you, in one of your previous meetings, discuss the Town Hill project?
That was discussed with the meeting that you were at, and we did get some more information on that. That's one of the things I couldn't remember exactly what Blair sent us, so,
Okay, because we came through with or I don't say we came through, we presented an actual warrant article with a dollar amount on it after our last meeting, which is March 14th, so I just wanted to make sure that,
we have a dollar figure, I just don't know if it's in the article. Hold on.
okay. So I just wanted to follow up on that.
Is that the 112,000?
this one's 71,350.
71.
71.
71,350, yes.
Yeah.
So we got that
I don't
number.
think we saw it. No,
Everyone, is everyone cool?
I'm not sure you sent that from Blair to.
Yeah, I don't think we got
I
it.
never saw
we
it.
get it.
So,
I swear to God, he's.
Well, that's what I was just looking at. It Would it come from you? 'Cause I didn't-
The way it was written, it wasn't, I didn't read, I hate Gmail, but that's how I get this stuff. And I didn't, the way it was written, I thought he sent it to everyone. I will forward it
I think
when I get home tonight.
Okay, that's, yeah.
I apologize.
I just wanted to clarify, I don't think we had it.
I don't feel like I'm comfortable with the special act yet. The sewer district special act.
Right. I don't know,
That's when I start.
Oh,
I assume you need
that's what we
follow-up
need.
on that.
There just seem to be a lot of
I
open
think,
questions.
I think it would be nice if Tom could be here next week.
Okay.
Tom is our counsel.
Yeah, that felt like the loose end we had, really.
Yeah, you're right.
I mean, just questions about it, but.
I'll be
I
here
think
next
there's, I
week as
think
well
there's
to talk about it.
philosophical as well as substantive questions about that one, too. I do know that Blair answered it, I don't know if he answered it incorrectly because he didn't know or what, but the district covers the whole B1, but he's saying that this act only covers the allocated lots. And I need some definitive clarification on that,
Yeah,
so.
because the sewer district was created several years ago.
Right.
Goes all the way down. You know, goes down to the end of the
And
B1,
this
right?
is- Right. That's what I'm saying.
Right, but
And when we asked him, you asked him that question, and the answer was that the special act only applies to the allocated lots. And if that's accurate, that's fine, but it doesn't match with what the sewer district covers.
I mean, the allocated lots may be the only ones with a reserve capacity, which is why they're.
Right.
I think that was my takeaway.
And I also need clarification on that, and because it's very confusing why the agreements, I need to understand why Ahold, who's the Stop and Shop owner, won't pay because the agreements go away and they need this act to pay. I don't understand what their hesitation or contractual obligations are that they feel they need to have this special act before they can start paying again.
We'll talk about it
Yeah.
next week.
Well, yeah, and
Yeah, we
I
don't
would
have-
have assumed that the private agreement that was created was abrogated when the town stepped in and created a sewer district.
That's
So
what
that
this-
would be some good background. Why does this old agreement
Well,
still
they're not
carry
paying
any
them under
water?
the old agreement, though.
Well, but it goes back to the old agreement. You don't have reserve capacity unless you're still following the old agreement. Once the town takes it, you think
Right.
there's no reserve capacity, it's just what the town does.
I think one of my issue is, why do they get to dictate to us how they're going to make the payments to us? They want the allocation. If they don't pay for it, they lose the allocation.
Yeah. I want to talk with you guys fresh and have the whole team there.
All right, yeah.
That way we're
Yeah,
speaking
okay.
earlier in the evening, I understand. But they're not dictating it to us why we're pursuing a special act.
That's a strong
We're
word. I
pursuing because
apologize.
we've had difficulty in getting funds. So I think let's have a full conversation with the full team.
I apologize for coming across that way, but it does seem like they've been holding
I agree.
a strong hand for 20 years here.
This one's very convoluted and complex. I think when we first talked about the wastewater act, to be honest with you, I don't think we understood the full ramifications of that. Because in some essence, when we did the new wastewater district, for all intents and purposes, we did away with the agreements.
Right.
But now with this act, we're trying to implement a piece of that agreement.
Right.
So it's convoluted, and we'll try and explain it a little bit better in the next meeting.
Thank you.
Going this route.
Brian.
The other question for town council was the ability to do a friendly amendment if 25 doesn't pass.
Yeah. I don't think it's his, I'm speaking on behalf of my vast legal training, which it doesn't exist.
Right.
I don't think it's an issue for him, but we can ask him.
At the end of the day, it's the moderator determines whether or not.
But what would, maybe another way to phrase it, let's get town council to say, what would the friendly amendment have to look like to comply with the
That's a good requirement. Thank you. All right.
Have Tom for next meeting.
I think that's it. So it's a small crowd, and we should, I know we still have minutes to do, but we should anticipate working our way through the warrant next week, too. I don't know if we'll finish, but we'll do our best.
In terms of budget, are we all set with any budgetary questions moving forward, or anything I should have on my radar for you next week?
I think I'm going to have, depending on what we do with the budget, the write-up on our message on it is going to be fairly blunt about the need to deal with the continued use of non-reoccurring funds.
Justin, do we have access to, and I was talking offline about this earlier, just, so big, real high-level overview, salary, expenses. But do we have the actual access to, even if it's just a electronic, email, like, I don't know if you use Munis or AUC or what, but the actual lines for each department, overtime went from 100,000 to 180,000, but maybe on this wage salary side, the expense side, purchase services went down 30 grand, to actually see where the money is going rather than just, okay, it went from 157 to 163. What line was affected? Are they, a different department spending way more on overtime? Are they spending way more on purchased goods, that sort of thing, versus just salary expense? Who knows?
I can speak with Todd about, obviously in Munis, we do utilize Munis. We do have the lines listed out. We're utilizing ClearGov for our budgeting purposes. So there should be lines in there. I would have to defer to Todd and see if he could do a printout from the online.
I know Munis can, because I used to have to present it in Foxborough. So.
Munis can, but Munis wouldn't be loaded until after we do the budget.
Well, it would have last year's, but it would have the request, right? Wouldn't they load the request in? No.
We're not going to do it until July. Once town meeting approves it, then they load it in afterwards.
So we load the request in. We load the request in.
Yeah.
Also, so you can see both.
Yeah.
FY24, FY25, and you can on every.
Yeah, we don't do that. But I can ask Todd just to get a printout of the ClearGov. I mean, we utilize it when we have our budget meetings. We utilize ClearGov, and I have that backup. I'll just ask Todd to see if we can get a printout for you guys.
Thank you. Problem.
So Ken brings up a very good point. I mean, this is supposed to be a budget committee. I feel like to make our decisions, we need a little more granularity, like particularly with actuals, right? Actuals to budget. So, for instance, it feels to me, it just feels, having been involved in town government, 15 years ago, that we're throwing off a lot of free cash these days, which we use for other stuff. In the fall, it's nice to have, but it also kind of depresses your budget, because we're not claiming the money we could. And I think I got the number wrong. Dave told me I got the number wrong, but when we were talking to Blair about the transfer station, he had the transfer station revenue as like 75 grand less than expense, which means it was 400 grand, but we're still showing like 275 in the budget documents we get. And I think Dave said to me later, no, I think Blair might have misspoke, and it's really tighter and closer, because...
that's the document I got today from him that I haven't opened, so I don't know. But...
if this process is going to have the integrity of, us actually voting on it, I think we need more information to be able to make good decisions. Yeah. And decisions that, you can stand up in front of the 120 people who come to town meeting and feel faith in. 250.
Optimist.
I think at a minimum, I think as... I agree with you.
We've heard about ClearGov. Yeah. I think we were given a tour of it at one point when it first became, but we don't have regular access to it, right? The whole... Yeah, okay. All right.
And there's a lot that went down. Like in DPW, there's a bunch of lines where expenses actually went down. Hey, that's good. They saved some money, but where they...
You don't know where you're saving.
We have no idea where they're saving the money.
Yep.
Okay. Thank you.
No problem.
Did we all set here with this? Okay, we have minutes?
It's the ones I sent out earlier were from
March
20th.
20th?
20th? Yeah. So a motion to approve March 20th's minutes.
Second.
All in favor? I have to do a roll call vote. Brian Beachkowski.
Aye.
Mike G.
Aye.
Joyce Terrio.
Aye.
Jonathan Hurwitz.
Aye.
Rob Garrity.
Aye.
Ken Fitzgerald.
Aye.
Jason Craig.
Aye.
Melissa Sear.
Aye.
David Lutz, aye. The motion passes, the minutes are adopted. So we still have last week, where you weren't at.
I wasn't here.
Send them to me.
So I can get them and forward them along, but
Okay, all right. And then, like I said, we'll try to work our way through the warrant articles after we have our discussions, see how many we can crank out next week. I think we got notice from the printer that, Erica got notice from the printer that he wants the date moved up from what we were working under. So the 20th? Where's it, like the 20th?
Could we
Could they get it?
So I think
as
we
early
might, I
as-
might start assigning, we might start assigning them next
Obviously,
week so
no,
that
we
people can
can't.
write. What?
Obviously, we can't get it to him by the 18th.
No,
which is what he asked,
right.
But I'm trying to see if they can meet us.
We can start, if we assign them next week, maybe people can start knocking off the easy ones. And we can talk about that next week, how the recommendations get put together for Jason and for Melissa, and how you participate in that. So with that, I'll take a motion to adjourn.
I move to adjourn.
All in favor?
All right.
We are adjourned. Shut the recording.